And we're live. For anyone who doesn't know, we also live stream this on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitch at what time is it? It's 10:30 Eastern time on Tuesday morning. That's 2:30 p.m. UTC. If you're not in one of those time zones, you're gonna have to do the math yourself. But I love you for listening and watching the live stream. Meanwhile, what's up, Warren?
Hey, thanks for clearing that up. And I always get the time zones, totally wrong. Living in Switzerland, we're at +2 UTC, and yeah, I mean some of those special ones in the North America are quite challenging.
Yeah, yeah. On my team currently, I'm in GMT -6. Have a person in GMT -3, one in GMT +1, and one in GMT +2. So
Uh, I only snickering here because we built a product, a stand-up bot called Stand Up and Prosper, and it was part of an old product that we had built a long time ago, and very quickly we realized, we may actually be one of those companies that now has to understand really lots of intricacies about how time zones work because like we have to send messages to people when it's 8 p.m. or 8 a.m. in their time zone.
right,
And we try to rely on like the Slack time zone for that, and it's not always valuable. And then we also have to display it in our UIs and also get it right on Slack display. And trying to schedule in a different time zone is always such a challenge there.
yeah. I worked at a startup one time. We did uh, medical imaging for trauma hospitals that on their
Okay.
trauma patients, and they decided to rewrite the core application in Java. We're not going to go down that path, but that's what they did.
My condolences.
Right, the very next time that daylight savings time went into effect for the U.S., we had about 2,000 trauma patients disappear from our system because they
Wow.
didn't account for daylight savings time. So that was a good time.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely some things where we allow events in the future and then we try to hide them being displayed just because pre-population of data is so important for production scale applications because you
Yeah,
don't want to wait until something actually happens before having those events in your database. So I can totally imagine that they're emitted in the future. So don't display them in any of the UIs to users because that would be confusing.
right. But speaking of time, it's that time of year that we're coming up on the end of year, the holiday season, which can have a lot of, it can mean a lot of things depending on what industry you're in, how your company handles closing the books at year end. And so that's what this episode is all about, is just kind of, I think it's kind of just us talking out loud as reminder to ourselves, as well as a reminder to the listeners of our show that those things are coming and to start thinking about them because we're going to be executing those tasks here before you know it.
You say that, and the first thing that comes to mind is when it hits to be Cyber Monday, I guess, or 3 weeks ahead of that, because realistically, that's when every year it just gets sooner and sooner. And I remember working at so many companies where someone was telling me, something's going to be different now. But as an engineer, I'm just like, I don't know what that means. I don't know how to. What am I supposed to do with that information?
Right. For me, the hardest part has always been getting that information out of marketing, you
Mm,
know, because they spend a lot of time and effort doing campaigns, marketing campaigns, whether it's ads, email blasts, or whatever, to build up these big sales events. And in doing this for 3 decades, I have never been successful in convincing someone from marketing that, hey, if you're going to funnel an extra 2 million people to the site, did you ever think about giving someone in engineering like a heads up?
yeah, I mean, that's always the most ridiculous thing. I think it leads. the conversation sometimes in an disappointing direction though, because it goes from like, okay, well, we're going to send out 2 million emails, but how many of those are going to be opened? And then you realize by many marketing departments, the answer is we have no idea. Uh,
Right.
and it's like, is that 2 million users coming to our site, or is it 200,000? Is it 20,000? And so a lot of times that stuff happens and there's zero impact to the business. And the most effective thing you could do is, just stop performing those experiments in that way, unless you actually know what the click-through rate is, what the conversions are going to be. And that's interesting you say that, because when we built Authoress a while back, one of the most common concerns we heard from our customers that were using our competitors is how they charge by monthly active users. And that means if you sign in, you get immediately dinged for a user count that then is amortized through the whole month, which means you're basically paying for 30 days worth of your advertisement, which is a huge cost, especially when these marketing campaigns go out. But yeah, I mean, yeah, engineering very rarely knows what to do there. And so we went to a pure charge by usage. So, if they only log in once, there's not a problem. But I still think most of those marketing organizations, they have no idea how many users are going to actually come to your site.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway from that is that I chose the wrong career profession. I chose one where my performance can be measured. That's my fault.
Oh, you say that, and now I really wonder how are you being measured? Because performance measurement in software engineering, I think, like anything, is it's much more difficult than widget production, which is highly repetitive, in which you can actually measure the throughput and quality metrics of the individual machine that's manufacturing those widgets, whether it's human or automated.
Yeah, from my perspective, since I'm mostly infrastructure based, a good bit of my performance evaluation is based on uptime and ease of deployment and error rate and things like that. Um, but I don't have any data to back this up, but I would say that a bigger part of my performance evaluation comes from perception of the teams that I support. Do they feel like they're getting the level of support that they need? And that just comes down to customer service. Recently had a situation on that exact same topic where someone felt like they were not getting the level of support that they needed. And the only thing I changed was at the end of every meeting, asking them, hey, is there anything that you are blocked on because you're waiting on us to do something? And just doing that, just calling it out to attention, was enough to change the perception of the performance.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was one of the biggest learnings I had from when I started professionally is I thought that my deliverables, as I coded them, as I architected them, was worth something. But and I knew that there was this thing of no, you're judged by politics is the word I would use to describe it, which I really think is a misnomer, honestly, because you aren't fairly or equality judged on what your outputs. It is really about the perception, and talking with whoever is in charge of promoting you is really the first important step that everyone really needs to take on day one when they get a job. How am I actually going to be evaluated? And over time, whether the things you're working on are actually relevant to being promoted or even just staying in your job.
Yeah, for sure. That's the whole like social side of your career. Like your technical skills are only part of it.
I mean, if you can get by working like not writing any code every single day and just saying like spitting a good game to your managers, you can get really really far. So much so, it's you laugh, but so much so that there's actually a name for this, and it's called effective managing up. And you actually see a lot of not helpful, probably not good managers doing this, and that's how they got to those positions. That they're really effective at convincing other people that they're doing things.
Yeah. Yeah. Which goes back to your earlier comment. That is very political. I mean,
Yeah.
in the US, that's the basis of our entire government. Without turning this into a political commentary,
Let's not
which
go there.
probably shouldn't do. Yeah. But so back on topic here, year end. What does year end look like for you over at Authoress?
Honestly, we don't really pay too much attention to it because we don't go through the marketing cycles. There is usually some amount of uptick that actually starts at the beginning of the year, especially for two reasons. One, for our products that deal more around the ASIC nature. So I mentioned we have a like number one or two Slack bot for handling stand-ups, and at the beginning, towards the end of the year, beginning of the year, there's a lot of vacations. People aren't all in the office; it's more remote work, and so figuring out how to manage your stand-ups in an async way is usually valuable. For Authoress, which obviously is our main product, budget comes in at the beginning of the year, and so that's when a lot of teams start thinking about more what's going on there. And towards the end of the year, they're dealing with all of the tech debt, all of the mistakes they've made in the previous 6 to 9 to 11 months before they get to that point. And I think one of the biggest ones is the marketing spam. Having actual users come on board. And I actually remember that earlier on in my career, I was working at a company that had billions of dollars in revenue coming in every year, and the Cyber Monday, Black Friday, huge deal days, right, for
Mm-hmm.
getting in lots of users to the site. Like not even having to ship out orders. I mean, the biggest problem is actually in the manufacturing world having to then turn around and manufacture and then ship that stuff out when it's not just sitting on your shelves. So much so that I remember that frequently management, quote unquote. I don't know who these people were. You hear it through the grapevine, like it's coming. There's going to be a massive wave. You need to prepare for that. So only really important software should be done at the end of the year. I feel like it's the even more ridiculous version of don't merge code on Friday afternoons. This is don't even think about code between now and after Christmas. And also, there aren't any people there in the office, so maybe also push that out to like January 8th. So from now until January 8th, everyone's on vacation, and that just always struck me as so utterly ridiculous that software engineers could, anyone really, but I'm going to blame software engineers, could determine the difference between like a critical thing that needs to get to production and like feature and something that's not, because you're often driven by that perception of this needs to get done, and you're often not in the situation of being able to even make that decision.
Yeah. Up until recently, I had never participated in the year end code freeze
Yeah.
strategy, but at Polygon, we actually have certain platforms where we do a year-end code freeze, and it's frustrating to me because I'm like, no, just just no. This is the part of the show where I wish I could cuss, but the truth is we have some very, very early stage products, and we've built some things that for all practical purposes have never been done before. So when it comes to monitoring and alerting, we have room to improve on that, because like if you've never done this thing, how do you know when the thing is doing the thing that it's supposed to do, and how are you going to alert on that? And there's certain stages where we just kind of watch it until we get the pulse of it, and then we can put monitoring on that. And so I think that's the big reason why we're reluctant to do year-end releases. And then also, combined with that, like you mentioned, a lot of people are out taking vacation, and then we're completely globally distributed too. So async communications are very, very async.
Yeah. I mean, there's a platform thing there, right? Like if you write games as your company's product, there's a validation process. Same with, I mean, similar to if you're in healthcare, some other apps, if you're deploying a mobile app for iOS or Android, there's a turnaround time there. And so even if your company is absolutely perfect, we do live in a more just-in-time world, a more agile world where you are depending on third-party partners. So even if you do the work, you know realistically it's not going to be actually able to get to production. So rather
Yeah.
than having it stack up where you're creating a lot of waste there that someone's still like, you don't want tons of merge requests sitting open, waiting for someone to come and test and review your code. You want to get those to production as soon as possible. There's no reason to start that work because you know it's going to be blocked somewhere. So I do totally get that, especially if you're depending on clients, right? You actually don't want to do any work until your client already says, why is it not delivered already, right? Because if they're not already waiting on you for it, chances are you're going to do the work and then have to wait on your client. And then you're like, wow, those 3 weeks to 3 months or longer, unfortunately, in some concern cases that I'm sure you've got, Will, that uh, you could have been doing something more valuable in that time.
Yeah, for sure. That makes me think of doing mobile development and getting your app approved to go into the
Yeah.
Apple App Store. Like, is that 3 days? Is that 3 months? Who knows? Is it consistent? Nope. It could be one right after the other every single time. And that makes it really challenging to roll out new features. And then compounding that, just because you release a new version in the App Store doesn't mean people are going to update. I remember when I was at Aptiv, we had a very, very small group of people, I mean, less than 10, that hadn't updated their app in 2 years. They were running on a 2-year-old version of the app and perfectly happy, but it was causing us some painful technical debt. And we finally had our marketing team, they did a marketing and customer service. They jumped through all kinds of hoops to actually figure out who these people were. And then I think they were able to contact them and ask them and like send them a gift card or whatever to upgrade their app.
I got two great stories on that point, actually. The first one is having built a very technical API. People talk about deprecating old stuff, but realistically, if you write it, you should just pretend it's never going to get removed. It's so much like the amount of churn, challenge, complexity of trying to convince your customers, as you described, to make a change there where there's zero, like there's negative value in making the change, right? It's all work. It's working today. Why would they realistically change?
Yeah.
It's just not worth thinking about in most cases. And there are so many companies I've worked with who had this mindset of, oh, we'll get them to change. And so they then have like 5 or 6 versions, like one every couple of years, every time there was a new engineering lead team, owner of that product, roll out something new. And so we started having version numbers in our endpoints and things like that. And so you see all of them available in production. Still, some of those companies I worked with, they still have those oldest versions still there because they don't have that amount of pull within their organization with their customers. And so actually one of the things we did when we wrote Authorus is that we just completely discarded that notion. Like there are no versions. It's will be like this forever, likely. It's so totally unrealistic. Now we do make some changes where we then like update our documentation. We may remove reference to fields that we still support, but we don't remove them because the amount of overhead that goes into it is really high. The other thing I'll say is I am totally that person that has old apps on their phone, like from multiple. And I think there's sort of like a two-sided extreme here where both of them are not great. There are tons of apps out there that every single time there's a new version, it's like you must update to use the app, and I hate it. And I'm going to call out Signal and Google because they both do this. They tell me all the time, hey, there's a new version. Google, at least you can skip it, but the pop-up always happens at the wrong time where I'm like, can you interact with me at the end of my workflow? Because then I'll accept the upgrade. And Signal just says, no, I'm sorry, you can't look at your messages until you upgrade. And that's just an incredible pain. And I totally get the other side where people are using the app multiple years later. I'm just so afraid of it breaking something or draining my battery life because I can't trust these apps and there's no way to stop them from interacting with the Google play integrations to get battery health or send messages, notifications, etc.
For sure. That's I'm the same way. Like as a developer, I'm like, why are these people not updating? But as a user, I'm like, I'm not updating that. It's working just fine. There's no way I'm going to risk this thing breaking.
I'll tell you a secret, and maybe this is letting the cat out of the bag here. I upgrade apps when something looks like it doesn't work. And I won't know why it doesn't work. So you could, for sure, if you had some way of feature flagging, like a couple buttons just breaking in a weird way, right? Like, I use Plex. And if you hit the, like, if I hit the play button and it like pauses it or starts playing and it like does a weird jump in the video and it keeps like it just starts happening, I'll be like, oh man, I gotta upgrade. So that's the secret for convincing your users to upgrade, is really have something where they don't think is really your fault, that you would have done intentionally to get the benefit there.
And now if you productize that as a service, you've got your next huge startup idea.
Yeah, graceful, like non-graceful degradation and app usage. Yeah, we like our core metric for our ICP would be like the number of broken apps we have in production at that moment. Like, our customers are currently destroying the user experience of 1 million users. That could be
That's funny.
Write that down.
Right. But meanwhile, back to year end.
Yeah.
Because that was our chosen topic till we wandered off. I feel like we wandered off.
Challenging.
Yeah. So in my mind, there's a couple of different categories of things that come up at year end. One of which you brought up that I hadn't remembered until you brought it up is budgeting for the next year. So you got to start campaigning for whatever it is you want to do and building a use case so that it makes it into the budget. And then, like we already mentioned, potentially, depending on your industry, increase in traffic for year-end sales and special. And, for a lot of companies, that's just largely a scaling issue. Like, we got auto scaling. It's fine. But I always like to go ahead and just kind of cross-check everything before we get to that point, because we've probably made a lot of changes throughout the year since we last tested this really hard. So I just want to make sure that we didn't inadvertently turn something off that we were counting on or something like that. And then the other category for me is like year-end closing of the books, which in my mind, that's a financial thing, but I also think there's an infrastructure side of it too. It's a good chance to check all your backups and your data retention policy and restore from backups into a dev network and validate those and just make sure that all of that stuff is working as well.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to be that Australian pension fund company where they lost all of their $100 billion worth of financial bookings for all of the citizens of the country because they were using one cloud platform that decided to be extra helpful in setting up their environment one day. So I don't know if you know the story here, but apparently
I don't.
So apparently there was an internal. So the first nit is that they were using VMware and on-prem, which I totally get. I've been there, but then they wanted to do a lift and shift, so they did it, and we're hoping that the cloud of choice, we're going to offer them VMware as a service, and they did. So they shifted to GCP, and the problem was the configuration that GCP provided for VMware was not sufficient to meet their needs, memory, RAM, CPU, I don't know what it was. And so they filed a support ticket to ask for them to basically create a vSphere cluster for them manually. And if you've ever built a technical product that has a high requirement on reliability or quality, you'll know that the thing that you really want to do is make sure you go through the public interfaces. And if the public interfaces don't support that, then you know that someone's going to have a bad day sometime in the future. And realistically, it's a good reminder where requests from one team to another one, like the support team to the ops team or product engineering team, should be quick to resolve. Either no, we're never going to do that or support it, or yeah, of course we'll get that in. In this case, updating whatever public API they had to be able to utilize it to actually generate the cluster in a needed way. But instead of going through that in the good old fashioned we can do it ourselves strategy, the team responsible for solving this task for the pension fund ran some scripts to dynamically generate a cluster using a tool that was built for non-production environments to automatically self-implode after a period of time that you the default was 1 year, and probably to stop development environments from consuming a lot of resources after they lost their value. And it was used for this, and so a year later, after creation of their environment, it disappeared, just as decided by the engineers of this internal tool.
Nice.
Yeah. So, if you may need to look all the way back to what happened last year at this time and use it as a metric for what could possibly be going wrong. I remember one year at one of the companies I was working with, we had a production outage soon after holiday, and that's what we called it. And it was related to the fact we had a table called the calendar table. And I kid you not, the calendar table ran out of days. And so it crashed production for all of our 1,000 Windows services that we had running. And the calendar table, may sound like it's a pretty clever thing, but what it actually was is a day count number as the index, followed by the day of the week that day was. And that was the whole table. And so if it didn't know what today was, it wouldn't know what the day of the week it was, so it wouldn't be able to do planning to figure out how much actual planning, both on the manufacturing side, but also planning how many people that needed to be in the office manufacturing plant in order to run the plant effectively. And so the fix, of course, was to insert more days in the table. And of course, the fix was someone runs a SQL script that just inserts, 100,000 more rows in the table, and no one thinks about this problem ever again.
This sounds like Mayan calendar as a service.
I guess maybe the lesson learned here is that when it comes to the end of the year, things are gonna break in some way.
Yeah, because there's always things like that where someone, hard coded a year or didn't, they're doing like math between months, and then so whenever the month number decreases, it screws something up, and that's a really good point. Those are things to I don't know that you can effectively look and identify those ahead of time without just a complete audit of every piece of code that you have, but it's something to keep in mind at the end of the year, when you go into the new year, when something starts acting really weird. Don't rule those kinds of things out.
I wonder if there's a framework that could actually be used and executed here. Like the thing to do on January 2nd is Control Shift F through your entire code base or Grok or whatever you're using and search for like WTF or / to do and see what actually comes up.
That's a great idea.
Like just schedule a reminder. Like every team could potentially do this. I mean, I hate these comments. They're so completely worthless in a lot of ways because it's like there's something wrong with the code that I'm looking at, but I don't know, I'm too lazy to do something about it, or there's just a time bomb here waiting to go off. At least explain what the problem is, right? Like what am I looking at? Why is this weird? Why is it confusing? And maybe to-dos are okay, but realistically, I feel like either it's something you want to do, in which case, file a ticket, or be like, this is intended behavior. And actually, one of the things we do is we add an explicit log statement. So we don't actually implement those cases, but we do log whenever there's a weird thing that gets hit. So it doesn't, instead of WTF, it's like WTF, like log, track this message. Why is this even happening? And someone should investigate. So that if we do hit that use case, we know to do something. And if we never hit it, no one has to care.
Yeah, for sure. I tend to, I can't say I've never created those, but I have gotten better over time at in the comments putting, hey, Will, or if you're reading this, so that it kind of stands out, and then try to set the stage so that future me knows why past me screwed me over like this.
Yeah, yeah, I totally hear you. I'm definitely like, there's lots of paragraphs related of content in comments in front of things that just aren't super obvious if you look at them. Like, why are we comparing this to the number 7, for instance? And like, you don't want the comments like, we compare this to the day of the week. Like, that's not helpful. Like, it's helpful when you explain why, from a business standpoint or a product standpoint, this whole code section is split this way. Like, if you're doing like a merge sort or any sort of sort algorithm, or you're trying to find a maximum value or a minimum value or some arbitrary p-value, like, don't say, oh, we try to find the p-value of 99. Say we want to find the p-value of 99 because, and then fill that out, so that you're actually explaining why the code is the way it is, because often that's not going to be included in the ticket. Maybe it is that generated, but usually not. And obviously you don't want to have to jump to that or look at the code comment that's related there.
Yeah, I think it was Don Felker that had a tweet, a really great tweet, that said that comments should explain why you're doing something, not what you did. The code itself tells you what you did, but the comment should tell you why you chose to do that.
Yeah, for sure. 100% agree. But I don't think anyone's going to explain to my previous senior engineer who was working on a different team in a previous company at the end of the year, who, at my request to not run production software on their own machine, decided to run production software on their own machine for a critical piece of software for the entire company. And during a long vacation break in the company, the cleaning staff unplugged the machine and crashed the service. I kid you not. And the really ridiculous part about this story is it was actually right around a holiday. Like, it was not a good story. The ridiculous part is we were migrating to AWS at that time, and this particular engineer, who I actually think was a equivalent of a staff or senior staff right now, said, I don't understand why we're going to AWS. We have working software on-prem in all of our data centers. That's sufficient. We have, experts running these data centers. And well, I think that statement sort of stands for itself.
Yeah. I'm sure you've seen the meme of like the laptop where the lid's partially closed with the sticky note on it that says, this is a production server, please don't close lid.
It's not a joke. Like, I have seen that in my career like 4 or 5 times now. Like, somewhere that is a thing. And it's always in places that have a really experienced engineering division. And they have engineers in non-experienced engineering divisions or staff that aren't IT focused who were forced to install something and run that application themselves. So if you're on an ops team and you tell one of your customers, hey, we're not going to do that for you because that's not our job, this is what they go and do. They go and install that production requirement, the marketing software that sends out all the emails to your customers on a single laptop somewhere, and put a sticker on it, and then actually find out about a problem. Like, I would be sitting somewhere, there'll be a laptop there, and someone will go over and unplug it, and I'd be like, you just turned that off. I have no idea why it was like that. It's weird. Like, you should know that it was weird. Why did you do that? And then like 2 hours later, someone will randomly show and be like, hey, this laptop, did you see what happened here? Did someone like turn it off? Like, what happened? This has to stay on. And we're like, I don't know. Someone just came over and unplugged it and then left.
Right. And my favorite part is when that happens is someone gets really mad that you had the audacity to turn off that laptop Like, how dare you turn off a laptop? It's like, wait, no, why are you running production software on a laptop? That's the core issue here. It's not the fact that I turned it off, it's the fact that you're running production software on your laptop.
Yeah, you know, I try to think of it from multiple perspectives. If there's a way to somehow put myself in their shoes of they just don't have an understanding of what the criticalness is or the interim, the lack of flexibility, the likelihood of this causing a problem, of the actions they're taking. I think human beings by nature are so myopically focused on the short term and not thinking about the long term. But also, I mean, we're the ones in the position of thinking about reliability and the operations of the software that's running and how to keep it reliable. And you got to imagine that other people are not.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so hard to look at things from other perspectives,
Oh, for
uh,
sure.
because, like, whenever I'm doing infrastructure work, I'm pretty tightly focused on high availability, fault tolerance, redundancy, all of that kind of stuff. But then, like, the next day I can be writing code, and you can look at the code that I'm writing and be like, has this guy ever heard of high availability? Because you just get so focused on solving that problem and fail to step back and think, wait, what other pieces do I need to make this?
That sounds like there's a story there.
Oh, there's probably a lot of stories there.
And it's those that like at the time you're just like I'm all red in the face. I'm like I can't believe this is happening right now. I have to totally chill out. And they're the ones that make for the best laughs later. I mean, maybe it's a little cliche, but those really terrible experiences that you're gonna have between now and the end of the year, they're great stories. Like I got another one. We were the face. I was running a team that was the face for our customers, UI and a bunch of backend services, and we didn't get any public praise. This is all about the perception. Like our stuff just ran no problem. And when it came time for the end of the year and increased load, we would often say, we don't need to do anything. We've looked at last year and the year before, and also what's happened in the last couple of months, and it looks like we have tons of capacity. What we're going to do anyway is just allocate twice as much capacity for no reason whatsoever and just run like that because who cares? It's our infrastructure. We've done a lot of cost optimization, so we don't have to worry about if a couple months or even a week or so we just bite the bullet there. And it was always a good idea, but totally unnecessary in almost every situation. That's one team. Now we depended on the reason we were so critical of the organization is because we depended on a lot of services from other teams who did not write such reliable software, who were not as concerned about software services that would never be interacted with directly by the customer. So we had a lot of things in our code, like automatic retries, async processing, pre-caching, loading from cache. Like we would call lots of services and they would fail, and then we would have really complex workflows to figure out, like, predict what the value was going to be in order to utilize it in most cases. Where we could. I mean, obviously you can't do it in every case, otherwise you wouldn't need the service. However, there was this other team who had problems every single week. There was something. It was always firefighting 100%. And because it seemed like they were constantly under pressure, that means they were also constantly solving problems, which gave them a positive perception.
Yeah.
And when it came to a huge load, their services would always get pounded into the ground. So the moral of that story is actually two more teams had to be spun up just to support the load of when something went wrong. So two teams in a support organization to talk to customers and deal with integrations because those software issues of having a service that's not reliable have real reaching impacts to customers. And they got rewarded for that, which has just always been not a thing I've looked kindly back in my career over. But they would say the most ridiculous things ever, where like on the surface may sound really intelligent, but if you dig down into it, it's like, so here's one. We know that there should be high load all the time that we often can't handle. So when there's no load, in order to make up for it, we know that load is going to come later. So whenever we experience a drop in volume, we scale up all of our services as much as we can to prepare for that waterfall that's coming. And on the surface, it's like, well, that's actually kind of clever. You know, if you expect 100 requests per second and you don't get any for 10 seconds, well, where did those 1,000 requests go? Someone was maybe hoarding them for that period of time. I mean, that's at least the thought. However, you also realize, well, like that's not really a good sustainable scaling strategy. You might as well just figure out how to deal with the burst load when it comes in. You know, figure out, use asynchronous software, use services that will actually allow you to support pulling or pushing that load off, and so you can actually normalize the curve over time. Don't rely on superstition or tradition to determine what your scaling policy should be.
Seems reasonable. You know, that type of scenario makes me think, and I think this is specific to the topic of today of year-end preparation,
Yeah.
where you have a lot of different pieces coming together. There can be certain scenarios where it's useful to create a temporary team and pull in people from different disciplines, different teams that are just focused on that temporary problem. You know, like say, okay, we know that we're going to have a massive increase in traffic because of the holiday sales this year, and that's going to be driven by marketing, but also it's going to affect the mobile app team and the backend API team, and the infrastructure team bears the brunt of that. So rather than try to manage all of those separately, it's often a good time to just pull key people from those teams into a temporary team and set their scope. Your scope is to manage this incoming load and make sure that we're successful at handling it from our customer's perspective. And then after that event's passed, the team disbands and goes back to their normal job.
Yeah, I mean, I think a project team in that regard, in that situation, is like the one time where it actually makes sense. And as long as they're not building anything, they're actually trying to prevent problems by using only what's already available. And because there's no long-term output really from that process, you don't have to worry about disbanding it at the end. Like that's a really good idea.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons it's successful is because you clearly define the scope.
Hmm.
And when I talk about defining the scope, I'm talking about not only saying, hey, this is what you're going to be focused on, but you have full authority to say no to everything that is not that thing, which is really important. I've seen that a lot throughout my career. We say yes to things almost with like this hidden assumption that there's always more bandwidth available. So we'll do everything that we were doing plus this new thing. And at some point you reach critical mass where in order to say one more yes, you have to say one more no to something else that you're not going to be doing.
I'd actually put it stronger. Everyone should be at that point already right now, whether you think you are or not. Like if you like, even
Yeah.
if you think you have free capacity, you probably don't. I know it may feel like that, but realistically, I know as individuals, we're very bad at evaluating our own free capacity and to be able to do things. And if you actually had free capacity to do extra things, do the thing you're doing more, like faster. Like, why is it just not already getting done? There's no reason to put something else in that spot. So I think realistically, every time you do something next, like I would always use this, especially for inexperienced engineers at the beginning of their career. You know, we should solve this. We should fix this problem. We should refactor this code. We should switch to now it's Rust, which I can finally get behind, but it used to be WebAssembly, or we should switch to whatever fancy new version of React that's out there. I'm so happy we don't use React at Office for so many reasons. There are so many better alternatives. And I'd always say the same thing, like, great, we can absolutely do that. Which thing that you're working on right now do you want to stop working on so that you can work on that instead? And really having that priority first conversation, because, well, most of the time of the year may actually be practice. It doesn't matter if they pick up this extra thing. it really helps to think about the priority order. So when huge important events come up, like the end of the year closing or whenever your end of the year closing is, or if you have a big marketing event, whenever that happens, whether you can know or not, it really is the production version of can I prioritize effectively?
Yeah, for sure. So that's a it's sort of along the same topic here. You talked about, Rust, and a lot of times as we talk about end of year and we're looking at projects for the coming year, and a lot of times there's a topic, like, oh, we should rewrite this in Rust, or we should rewrite this in, whatever, you can pick whatever. How do you go about making the case for that? Like if you're
Well,
campaigning for time and budget for the coming year, how are you going to structure that campaign?
I mean, I get to make those decisions, so I guess I'll put this maybe in the flip side of like what I'm looking for when someone comes and
Excellent point.
tries
Yeah,
to
yeah.
create this, whatever that change is. I mean, I don't feel like I go out and hire engineers. Like that's sort of like a skill capability you have. Maybe you're a systems thinker, like you're able to understand how doing one thing impacts doing another thing. Yeah, for sure you can write in a couple of different languages, but realistically the teams exist to solve some business problem. That's why they're there. And so looking at the business problem, short, medium, and long term is what I care about. So tell me a story that solves short, medium, and long term problems. Now maybe there's a problem today and it needs to get resolved, and so you want to deliver quick little improvements today. What does that look like to solve that? And then medium, you want to do a bigger project to make sure that we never have to worry about that again. And long term, like why are we even discussing this problem? Like this problem is too small scale for us. It should get automatically solved by what we have, by our infrastructure, by a single new feature ticket. And so think about conveying those things when discussing potential ideas of what to work on. So the change to Rust. Talk to me about error budget. Talk to me about speed of delivery for new features. Talk to me about maybe the reliability of what we have, the quality of what we have, the ability to deliver new things based on the frameworks that are available, et cetera, right? The actual impact of doing that. And nothing comes for free, right? I want to know the cost of if we make this switch, how long are we going to paying the cost, short term, medium term, long term? And I got to see some benefit there. Now, I don't expect a perfect financially planned strategy for every single part of the process, but some thought has to have gone into it, right? How many of our engineers know about this programming languages? How many of them want to know? Hiring in the market is a challenge there, right? Maybe, maybe not. Do we have big projects coming up where we already started with something we have and now we need to potentially put that on hold in order to do the switch, or we'd have to write it twice, right? So there's throwaway work.
Yeah.
And an understanding of that tells me that you've thought enough about this problem that I could let you go and run with it. I can delegate it to you effectively. Otherwise, you're basically saying, I want someone else to solve this problem, right? When you come up with a problem and you share with someone else, hey, we should do this thing. Try to figure out what you're doing, right? Are you complaining about it? I don't like X. Or are you saying, I want you to fix Y? Or are you saying, I want to do this. This is what it will look like. This is the impact to the team and the organization. And then I'll say, great, sounds good. Or if it's a bigger impact to the business in some way, we'll probably get into our initiatives for the next quarter and our quarterly planning. And they will just show up there. And someone who is most relevant to be working on that at that moment may or may not be you, right? Just because you came up with a good idea doesn't mean that it makes sense for your team to work on it. We'll take over and start running with it.
Yeah, for me, the starting point of all of those conversations has to be one of two things. How does this increase revenue for the company, or how does it decrease operating costs for the company?
I think you're maybe being a little bit too unfair there. I mean, I totally agree that should be the actual impact at the end of the day. Like, it has to be one of those two things realistically. I mean, there's also social capital as well, right? Like maybe you're scaling up longer term and hiring additional people is important. So, maybe you've got PHP or Ruby you're using and you want to sell. Well, it's difficult for us to get engineers. It's difficult for us, 2 or 3 years down the line. We're going to have to make this switch at some point. It has nothing to do with the operating cost today or making revenue right now, but longer term, there's a lot of trade-offs. I it needs to be thought about, but like you don't have to come to the table with like this is the number of dollars that we're gonna save. Now, maybe I mean,
Oh, for
will your
sure,
boss
for sure.
apparently? I mean, it's much better, right? You know, if you could actually do some sort of analysis, you know, feel free to take that. But it's sort of the thing where, like a pull request on architecture, you don't need to come with the code perfect, all written for the whole feature. You know, I have some idea. Should I even start thinking about what the next step is here, or should I forget about it? Like, you know, give me some feedback. Is this a good idea? Is switching to Rust maybe a good idea? And I'll say, could be, maybe, you know, tell me about it. And then you say, I actually don't know. Let me go do some investigation. I'll be like, okay, sounds good.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm still stuck on those two.
I think, you know, for a long time I was as well. The thing that broke me was companies that focus on some sort of social good, which is neither necessarily cost reduction or revenue generation. So if there is a tragedy of a common situation where you want to get out from under it, you know, take the climate crisis, right? We have a thing that's neither revenue nor cost. I mean, of course, you can model the criticalness of our direness of our human society at this moment. It's a huge problem. You could measure the rate of temperature, atmospheric increase or oceanic temperature increase as your metric that you're going after. So, I mean, whatever it is for your business, right? You know, if you're making money, then for sure it's, I'll say profit, not necessarily revenue. Both of them are bad metrics for different reasons, depending on how you're abusing them, right? And you're right. Startups care about revenue, not profit, and real companies care about profit and not revenue. Uh, but you could just be making a lot of money, return on investment that really isn't worth it. So, you know, what is the important thing for your company? I totally agree with you, Will.
Yeah, for sure. And that's probably something that happens in my mind that I don't express enough is whenever I talk about currency, it's not always dollars. It's the product itself. Like if you're an open source company, you don't sell your software, but you still have a currency. The currency is the number of people who download and use your software and build on top of it. So when you talk about when I talk about increasing revenue, it may not be US dollars or euros. It's whatever currency measures the success of your product.
So Solana or Ethereum?
Yeah. Or Polygon.
You have your own token.
We do. Yeah. Matic.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that one. That's that's the most important currency to actually own. So you should measure everything in Matic, and then you'll know whether
Yeah.
your idea is a good one.
But that's a really good point because as we're an open source company,
Yeah.
and so for us, the currency is getting people to build on the Polygon network. Matic, the token itself, is actually a byproduct of that. That's just an exchange ticket that all of these people who build on top of our network use for transactions. The success of Polygon itself is building a network that enables people to do that. So for us, revenue is the number of people adopting the Polygon network as their blockchain framework or blockchain network.
I mean, it is money in a way. Each transaction that happens is you're getting the revenue out of that. The number of transactions can be your revenue.
Right, right. Yeah, and the actual Matic, monetary Matic associated with that goes to the validators who Polygon is some of those right now, but mostly is other people. So we're even only partially affected by that with a longer term goal of not having anything to do with that.
I mean, arguably, it's not even necessarily relevant for you. I mean, that's happening outside. You're a contributor in some way, and so whatever that is more important than what's necessarily happening in the network. I mean, while the network is super critical and important for success, it may not be something you can directly affect.
Right. Cool. So, all right, closing thoughts on your end.
You know, I never met an engineering team where if I said like, today you got to do everything differently because it's a particular set of numbers on the calendar, and then actually went and made some fundamental changes in their process. I don't think it really works that way, unfortunately. It's not like you change how you're doing code reviews. You're not all of a sudden more secure. You don't automatically change what you're doing, or maybe you add extra reviewers. You don't change the values of your team, the identity, or your processes, just like that. I think preparing for this is a cultural shift. It's what happens throughout the whole year that makes you prepared for situations like this, as well as testing your backups, other out of band processes that you want to validate, or potentially building specific teams that have an identity that matches the execution you want. But yeah, telling software developers to, don't commit as much code doesn't it doesn't hold a lot of water.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think for me, the big takeaway is it's a good time of year to pause, think about it, figure out how it applies to your situation, and then take action away from that. May have an impact, it may not have an impact, but I think it's worth taking a moment to just stop and think about it, because we get so focused in the day to day. Like today, I'm focused on these tickets, and
Yeah.
here's the thing. And so I think the big takeaway for me is just the call out. Today's ticket is to take a step back and look at things from an entire organizational perspective.
I mean, I think that's a really good point that is lost. I was reading a paper about improving based on training, and the tickets, the standard work is sort of your production mode. You're doing the work, you're delivering it. In order to become better or even sustain yourself, you need a practice mode. You need to go where it's safer to learn new things even. And when do you actually deliberately go and do that? If you don't, then you're burning your ability to deliver effectively. And it could be a good reminder that it's the end of the year. It's time to start doing some things deliberately. That's different than your standard strategy. Actually thinking about how you do that work or what it is, and even a simple thing like validating some of your processes, huge benefit.
Yeah, for sure. Even if you're, maybe especially if you're junior in your career, it's a good training exercise, because as you advance in your career, these things are going to be more relevant to your role. So it's a good chance to think about that and then have that conversation with your manager or your boss and start gaining some perspective that way to help yourself later on in your career.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Should we do some picks?
Yeah.
All right, what you got?
So I've been playing a lot of one particular game since the summer Steam sale. I bought a couple, and I mean, I just like keeping old apps on my phone. I'm playing games from years ago because they're cheaper, and I don't mind playing out of date content. It's like 30 more years, and I'll probably play Breath of the Wild. Okay, so my pick this time is actually a game called Frostpunk. It's the best way I can describe it is it's a RTS against the cold weather climate, and you, instead of trying to defeat an alien race or some other civilizations that are out to attack you, you need to deal with the temperature rapidly decreasing in a ridiculous scenario. So it's resource collection and et cetera, civilization building. It's not that you only get to up to like 600 people or something, so good number. And it's not technically an RTS, but I think RTS against the weather is how I'll categorize it.
Right on. Cool. Go ahead.
It's really stressful. I'll say that. I will get, I have to play during the day because I play it into the night. And I'm not the kind of person that gets stressed over things, but if you ever worked and you said something that you felt like was stupid to your manager, or you didn't think it was stupid, but then your manager said something and made you feel like what you said was stupid, and then you think about it all the way into the night and while you're sleeping on it, that's what happens to me with this game.
Gotcha. I don't hardly play games anymore, and I do miss it because I used to love playing games.
Yeah.
But the few times I've gone back to play games, like my skills are so rusty. I just suck so bad that it's not even fun. The exception to that, um, I'll just actually make this my pick. Did you ever play the Half-Life series?
I did not.
I loved the Half-Life series. That was just such a great game for me. And I've got the Oculus VR headset. And so there's a new, relatively new, this game is several years old now. There's a new addition to the series called Alex that's in VR. And the game mechanics of it are just so well done. You know,
Wow.
when you put on the headset, whenever you pick something up, you know, you get the little vibration slap in there, and it's very intuitive. You know, you put the headset on, and within like 30 seconds top, you're completely immersed in this world, having tuned out the real world, that it's just that well done. So
Wow.
that was a cool game.
So no Half-Life 3, but there's a subset game series
Right.
game for VR. I mean, that's got to be the biggest joke of them all.
Yeah, yeah, no Half-Life 3, but there's 4 add-on expansions for Half-Life 2 and the side quest Half-Life Alex.
Wow. That's that's a bit ridiculous. You know, I used to play all sorts of games, many different kinds, and I never really figured out what type of gamer I was. And over time, I realized there are certain things I just don't want to feel like work. And so, like a lot of games, I realized just became work. Like RPGs that are the JRPG style just felt like boss grinding, just so much work. Lots of games just end up become like resource management games, just like a lot of extra. Like I just spend all day thinking about architectures and software, and then I go home and I'm playing basically a game where I have to do something. It's just a huge nightmare. And so, like, trying to really narrow down the types of games I play. Um, I did play FPSs for quite a long period of my life, though.
Yeah. I I hear what you're saying on that. I'm the same way. Like, I don't want to be challenged in the game. I'm not here to level up. I'm looking for more of like an interactive movie.
Oh, interesting.
That's
Yeah, I'm
that's
def
my gaming style. I want to be entertained.
if there's no plot to the game, I that's like immediately I don't know why I'm playing this. I might
Yep.
as well be playing with a fidget toy.
Yeah.
So that's for sure number one requirement. The second one is it's gotta like I almost don't like combat, honestly. Like it feels so as like an extra chore. Puzzles I like. I like puzzles in a game. So like those two things super important for me. But most of the other things like if I got to do the same thing over and over again, it's not for me. So it sort of eliminates a lot of things. Like I don't know how people do the rogue like games, so like the Diablos, which you just go into the dungeon and murder a bunch of things over and over again for
Just a
hours on
complete
end.
slaughter fest.
I mean, I've done it. You know, it's sort of interesting the first couple of times, but after that, it's like I've seen the story. I played the game. Is there I mean, maybe there's a second ending somewhere. You know, there's got to be something at the end that you
Right.
get. I used to be achievements driven, but after I realized, yeah, that's pretty much just extra work. I don't get anything for it. Then, I mean, if a game told me if I get through all the achievements, they would give me like a tenth of my money back, I would totally do that. I would play the
Right.
game longer. I would definitely play all the game through for sure.
Yeah. Would you do it for like social validation achievements? Like this you get this special icon on LinkedIn or whatever.
I did the Xbox achievements way back a long time ago. I tried to do all of them. I used to be a completionist, and the game that broke me was Assassin's Creed. I absolutely love the game. I know everyone's going to tell me if you've ever played, oh, 2 and 3 or 3 and 4, whatever. You know, the ones with Ezio Auditore are so much better than what's his name? Not Desmond playing Altair. But I'll say that much better game. But there were 1,000 of these flags in the game. You had to go around and find all of them, and there's no indication of where they are or which ones you've gotten. So, like, even if you know where all the flags are, you have to go to every single location in this giant open world in order to actually find them. And I just like after the third time of going through literally the whole game in every single place where every flag is, and I still couldn't find some. I'm just like, That's it. I'm done. Like, and I realized like who is looking at these achievements? Like they're sort of for me. Like I don't have like tons of friends who are like, oh wow, Warren has all the achievements for all of these games. Like social validation. I mean, what is that? So,
Got
yeah.
supermodels sliding into your DMs. Hey, I saw your achievement there.
I mean, if that happened, I think I'd be a different person today. But so I guess it's safe to say that never happened. I mean, I don't know. I guess I wish I had lived your life, Will, where that was something to look forward to all the time.
Right. Yeah, it keeps the voices in my head entertained. So,
That's what's important.
right.
Well, they're all only voices in your head.
Sure. Yeah, we'll go with that. All right, cool. Warren, thank you for your time. It's a great
Yeah, of
chat with
course.
you today.
Yeah.
And thank you for listening to this episode. And we'll be back next week. I don't actually know what next week's topic is.
I have no idea, but
Yeah, so we'll all be surprised.
yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see y'all.